The College Football Playoff Semifinals are here. In the Orange Bowl, we got Penn State versus Notre Dame. In the Cotton Bowl, we got Texas versus Ohio State. These are four of the best teams in college football, but they are not the best four. I'm about to talk about it really fast. Welcome back, everyone. Mazarski Memos, episode 24, College Football Playoff Semifinals preview and quick quarterfinal rundown. I mentioned this quick quarterfinal rundown because I do think there is a problem with the college football playoff format. When you combine all four bye teams in Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, and Arizona State, they led for a combined 5 minutes. And that was Georgia. Oregon, Arizona State, and Boise State did not lead. And when you look at the college football playoff rankings, not the seedings, the rankings, the one seed Oregon played the six seed Ohio State. The two seed Notre Dame played the five, or the two seed Georgia played the five seed Notre Dame. The three seed Texas, who lost to the two seed in Georgia, played the nine seed in Arizona State. The three seed in Texas, who lost to Georgia, played the 12 seed in Arizona State. And the four seed in Penn State, who lost to Oregon, played the nine seed in Boise State. That is a coherent problem. And the problem comes because of these conference champions in the Big 12 and the Mountain West, and Arizona State and Boise State getting incentivized for winning their conferences by getting a bye. They go from the 9 and 12 to the 3 and 4. When that happens, the 3 and 4 go down to the 5 and 6. The 5 and 6 go down to the 7 and the 8. That becomes a harder matchup for the 1 and 2. Is that a knock on Boise State and Arizona State? Absolutely not. They have some of the best players in the country. Ashton Jeanty, Cam Scadaboo, Maddox Matson, and Sam Levitt both had great years. But Texas and Penn State, who lost their conference championship, should not have been incentivized by playing worse teams than Oregon and Georgia, who beat them, should have. And look, I understand that you're supposed to win the game in front of you, but Oregon and Georgia played harder opponents than Texas and Penn State. That's why Oregon's no longer there. Ohio State was the favorite to win it all. They lost 2 games this season by 4 combined points. They moved down to the number 8 seed. And then on the other hand, Notre Dame moves down to 7 because Texas moves to 5, Penn State moves to 6. I don't think anybody's going to argue that Texas and Penn State are worse teams than Boise State and Arizona State. Again, not a knock on the Sun Devils and Broncos. That's just how it is. And this is going to keep happening, right? The 1 seed and the 2 seed are going to win their football games. They're going to get in as the 1 and 2 seed. They're going to be drawn harder matchups than the 5 and the 6. The 5 and the 6 are going to be the runners up in the SEC and Big Ten and possibly the ACC or Big 12, but probably not. And they're going to have to play an extra game, but then they get an easier opponent in round 2. And I understand that getting a bye is a reward and stuff, but these teams go about their business. They play an extra game and they're fine with it. Look at Texas. Look at Penn State. They played an extra game and they both won their quarterfinal game too, and that's why I'm about to talk about them. I'm anti-format, but it's not the only excuse. Or it's not an excuse because these teams have to win their games, especially Oregon. Look, Ohio State's the best team in the country. I said it on the last podcast too, probably. You got to win your games, but Georgia should not be playing Notre Dame while Texas plays Arizona State. Oregon should not be playing Ohio State while Penn State plays Boise State in that. And so there's an inherent problem with the format, and it's going to keep happening because the 1 and 2 seed, like I said, are going to win their games. The 3 and 4 teams in the country who are probably the runners up in the Big Ten and the SEC, at least for the foreseeable future, because of the seeding, will go down to the 5 and 6. The Big 12 ACC Mountain West champions will go up to 3 and 4, moving 5 and 6 down to 7 and 8. Exactly what happened makes a harder matchup for the 1 and 2. The whole point of this is to incentivize teams for winning their conference championships, but at some point it has to stop or these teams will not have an incentive. With that being said, let's just get into a comprehensive preview of both games. We'll start with Penn State, Notre Dame in a second, but let's start vague. Defense wins championships. If you asked me a month ago who the 4 best defenses are in college football, I'd say Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas, and Penn State. Ohio State is first in points per game and yards per game allowed. Notre Dame second in points per game, 7th yards per game. Texas 4th points per game, 3rd yards per game. Penn State 7 points per game, 6 yards per game. There are stars on every one of these defenses. There are first-round prospects on every one of these defenses. Caleb Downs, Ohio State, Abdul Carter, Penn State, Drake Bowen for Notre Dame, and we got Jahdae Barron for Texas. I could go on and on and on. These are 4 defensive-minded teams. These are the 4 best defenses in the country, and there are stars up and down. So now let's get into Penn State, Notre Dame, because like I said, this is going to be a defensive matchup. But at the same time, these are two of the best rush offenses in the country, arguably. You start with Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price have combined for 1,700 yards on the ground and 23 touchdowns. You add in quarterback Riley Leonard, transfer from Duke. He has 715 yards and 15 rushing touchdowns, along with all the stuff he does in the air. The Nittany Lions have Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. Both had over 1,000 rushing yards on the season, 17 touchdowns between them. Like, if you want to talk about the equivalent of Sonic and Knuckles when it's Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in the NFL, look at the Fighting Irish. Penn State's more Sonic and Sonic, or maybe Sonic and Knuckles because Allen is that power guy. These are two really, really good rushing attacks. And the biggest question with Penn State and Notre Dame is whether their quarterbacks are going to show up in the air because both Drew Aller and Riley Leonard have both struggled sometimes in the air. Look at Notre Dame against Georgia. They didn't score a long touchdown drive. They were outgained by Georgia, 296 yards to 244. Notre Dame's two touchdown drives, one came on a Gunnar Stockton turnover, then Riley Leonard threw a touchdown pass. Great throw, by the way. Second one was a kick return to open the second half. Notre Dame did not have a long touchdown drive. That can happen against Penn State. Penn State, Drew Aller did throw for 3 touchdowns against Boise State, and he looked much better, but there are games where he doesn't look good, especially like a game against Ohio State or SMU, these cold games in Happy Valley. He's not doing it. And look, the weather's not a problem because it's the Orange Bowl. The best matchup, though, is this rushing offense against the rushing defense on both sides. Penn State has one of the best rushing defenses in the country. They're going to get Love, Price, and Leonard. Expect a lot of read options. Marcus Freeman today said that Love is healthy. I'm excited to see them go. On the other side, Notre Dame's defense, Drake Bowen, leading tackler. Marcus Freeman stacks everybody in the box. They play a lot of man-to-man. Allen and Singleton have their work cut out for them. The Nittany Lions just held Ashton Jeanty to just over 100 yards. Before that, he was averaging over 170 yards per game. We know how good Ashton Jeanty is. And so, when you put this all together, you're going to get a trenches matchup because these are two very good offensive lines and very good defenses. And speaking of the Penn State offense for a second, it's been really good. 25 plus in 7 out of their last 8. 2 1,000-yard rushers, like I said. Drew Aller has his games. He's a prototype NFL prospect. He's coming back to school for another year. And so if Penn State's able to move the ball better than Notre Dame, they'll win this game. And with that, let's get into a prediction. I just talked about the Penn State offense. My prediction's not going to go that way. Notre Dame 24, Penn State 23. Give me the Fighting Irish to win the Orange Bowl and go to the national championship. Penn State has played 2 big games against Power 5 teams this year. They played Oregon in the Big Ten Championship, and they played Ohio State in Happy Valley. They lost in both of them. They lost by 7, but they were significantly the worst team in both of them. They got dominated in the trenches, and while their defense was able to play well in the Ohio State game, it didn't matter because their offense couldn't score. They can't play a complete game against this higher competition, and that's been a problem for Penn State for years. And so against a team like Notre Dame that has an offensive line with an average height of 6'3", that has a defense that plays a lot of man-to-man and just held Georgia to 10 points and has held so many, one of the best defenses in the entire nation, Penn State's going to have a lot of problems. On the other side, I do think that Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, Riley Leonard get it going. One of the biggest difference between Penn State playing Boise State and Penn State playing Notre Dame is Maddox Matson's not a threat with his legs. Riley Leonard is. You saw it against Georgia. Oregon also ran the ball really well against Penn State with Jordan James and Noah Whittington. When there's this 2-headed rushing attack, or even 3-headed for the Irish, the Penn State Nittany Lions struggle. And I'm not going to say Penn State shouldn't be here because they're a really good football team. I just think Notre Dame gets the job done. Now moving on to the GoodYear Cotton Bowl, we got number 5 Texas versus number 8 Ohio State. I think a lot of people, not me, would say that this is a national championship prediction from the start of the year. These are the 2 most expensive rosters in college football. There are stars up and down. Let's go through it. Will Howard versus Quinn Ewers. Transfer quarterbacks for both. It's about limiting turnovers, but they're both stars. Then you have 2-headed rushing monsters on each team, starting with the Buckeyes, Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson, each over 1,000 total yards on the year, versus Quintravion Wiesner and Jaden Blue for the Longhorns. Then you look at the wide receiving core, Jeremiah Smith versus Matthew Golden, Emeka Egbuka versus Isaiah Bond. You got Carnell Tate versus DeAndre Moore, Ryan Wingo, whoever Steve Sarkisian puts out there. Ryan Day versus Steve Sarkisian. It's a big coaching battle. You have two of the best offensive lines in the country. And I'll talk about the defense in a second, but these are two offenses that have talent, talent, talent. And so the biggest thing in this game is limiting turnovers, which, to be fair, both quarterbacks were able to do. Will Howard played one of his best games of the season against Oregon, the number one team in the country. Oregon's defense isn't all worldly. And so, but he still played well. He threw 17 for 26, 65% completion percentage, three touchdowns, no picks. Two touchdowns to Jeremiah Smith, one to Emeka Ibuka, and one of the most beautiful balls I've seen all season. Quinn Ewers hasn't really limited turnovers. He threw one interception against Arizona State, but it was a gimme in the last minute, throwing a deep ball, bad situation. He was 20 for 30, 322 yards, three touchdowns pick. Whichever team's able to force turnovers more, interceptions, fumbles off these quarterbacks that I'm not going to call them flawed, but they do make their mistakes, is going to win the football game because these are two very good passing defense, probably the two best passing defenses in the country. Between the two, they have allowed 14 combined passing touchdowns. Ohio State 6, Texas 8. They are so physical when it comes to defensive back rooms. Texas has the Jim Thorpe Award winner in Jedi Barron. He has 7 interceptions on the year, something like that, joined by Andrew Makuba, Malik Muhammad, Michael Taffy. Had an arguable targeting call, but it is what it is. Ohio State, Denzel Burke's their best corner. Then Caleb Downs is a freak all over the place. He'd go in the top 10 if he was eligible. Sonny Styles, 6'4 safety all over the place. Lathan Ransom's always in the box. Davison Igbinosun for Ohio State might be their biggest weakness, but he played well against Oregon. These are two very good passing defenses. Texas forces turnovers too. 21 interceptions on the year, ended the Arizona State game with an interception. And it's not only the passing defenses because these teams get to you, these defenses get to you. Look at the defensive line. The biggest thing for Ohio State from their first matchup against Oregon to their second matchup was their defensive line getting pressure. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Tyleik Williams, whoever you put out there, they had two combined pressures in Alton Stadium against Oregon on October 20th or whenever that game was. Against Oregon in the Rose Bowl, Dylan Gabriel was constantly under duress, and that's why Ohio State was able to jump out to a 34-0 lead. Yeah, a lot of it's their offense, but Oregon's one of the best offenses in the country. Ohio State was constantly able to pressure a Heisman finalist in Dylan Gabriel and cause duress, and you got to give props to the defensive line because of that. And it's not only them, it's the linebackers too. I mean, you start with Cody Simon. He has 97 tackles on the year. He was all over the place. Ryan Day's not afraid to put people in the box too. And they move around. Sawyer, Tuimoloau, Simon, Lansom, Williams, Caleb Downs blitzing. Ohio State's defense has completely changed since losing to Oregon. And they're not the reason that they lost to Michigan. That's the offense. And so if they don't lose to Michigan, Ohio State probably wins the Big Ten. But now they're here, and that's the most important thing. And their defense is the best in the country. On the other side, Texas, Anthony Hill's probably the best linebacker in the nation. 107 tackles on the year, 7.5 sacks. On the other side, Texas's pass rush, Colin Simmons leads the team with 9. They get to the quarterback, and so it becomes these two offensive lines against one another against the defense. And both these teams' philosophies, my guy against your guy. Ryan Day recruits talent. Steve Sarkisian recruits talent. They're two of the best in the country. Ohio State's a 5-star factory. Texas is a 5-star factory. These teams have talented players, and it is going to be a one-on-one matchup, like I said. Howard versus Ewers, Judkins versus Wisner, Henderson versus Blue, Smith versus Golden, Buka versus Bond, Berg versus Moore, Muhammad versus Igbenusum, Hall versus Simon, on and on and on. You see what I'm doing? These teams are so talented. Number 1 defense in the country versus number 2. Transfer quarterback from Ohio State who turns over the ball. Transfer quarterback from Texas who transferred from Ohio State turns over the ball in big games. And so, whichever one plays a better game and their talent shows up will win this football game. I just ranted, but with that, let's make a prediction. I'm going Ohio State 30, Texas 23. I do think this is a higher scoring, even though there are two of the best defenses in the country. Quinn Ewers and Will Howard will be really safe with the ball. I do truly believe that. They might turn over it, and I wouldn't be surprised because these are two defenses that are really good at forcing turnovers. I just think Ohio State's a better team from top to bottom. I think that they're coming off that hot one against Oregon where they smoked the Ducks. They literally smoked them on a rotisserie and ate them. And so coming off that, Texas has a little worries. They almost lost to Arizona State. I think these are two teams not necessarily going in different directions. I just think the Buckeyes are the favorite. This game is in Texas, so it might be a home game for Texas, but at the same time, Ohio State is one of the best fan bases in America. They travel well. But at the end of the day, give me the Buckeyes. I think Will Howard does better than Quinn Ewers in this game. Ohio State's able to run the ball behind Judkins and Henderson. I think Jeremiah Smith makes a few catches. And Ohio State's defense is first in points per game and first in yards per game for a reason. And they're really good at turning over the football. I think they get to Quinn Ewers a few times. Give me the Buckeyes. Thank you for everyone that listened here and is still here on Mazarski Memos. I really enjoy doing this preview. College football is one of my favorite sports. Check it out on TikTok too, Spotify, all these platforms, and see you soon.